Hello and welcome to Prog Chattery 777. We're talking about Genesis. We've made it pretty well through the whole we've made it through all the main proggy albums, and now we're deep into the 80s. We have reached the self-titled album. 1983, yes, I thought so. Yeah, Genesis by Genesis. They'd never done a self-titled, so they figured why not. I think the reason they called this one Genesis is that this is the first time possibly ever where every song was contributed by the group as a whole. At this point, they all had their own solo careers going. So, Genesis was now, the reason for being Genesis was that they could write together. And it's a good thing they did, because there's still some good Genesis music to get through. And this album is quite highly regarded. Of the 80s albums, it's one of the, more highly regarded ones. A lot of people look to this one more than they look at Abacab, which, I don't know. It's a similar thing with Trick of the Tail and Wind and Wuthering for me. I feel Abacab and Genesis are kind of very closely related, and I'm usually conflicted, like, which one do I like better? And the answer is I think they're both on an even keel. The band at this point was super stable. I mean, like I said, they were all doing their own solo careers, but they all still wanted to keep the Genesis thing going. And there was really no drama. I mean, obviously working with three people is a lot easier to get, it's a lot easier to get things done. There's less people to argue, and I think they really found their muse as collective songwriters at this point. And the result is, all in all, a pretty strong album. Definitely a two-sided album. One side is definitely a lot stronger than the other. The first side is the strong one, and the second side is kind of the oddball song side, but there's still good things there. So I'll get right down to it. I'm not a big fan of the album cover, to be honest. I think it's a bit cheap looking. But there you go. That's what they went for. Shapes. So, get right down to it. We're going to talk about the first song on side one is Mama. Now, this is the famous one. I think this is one of the best Genesis songs there is. This is an absolutely classic Genesis song. It's not like the early stuff at all, but it is a progressive proggy kind of a track. It is a track by a prog band. Very atmospheric, and although structurally it's quite simple, it does go through, it is a gradual build-up, and it starts in one place and it ends in another place. So I guess it is kind of like the earlier stuff in that, but stylistically it's definitely in the 80s. As you start out, you get the drum pattern, the drum machine pattern, and yeah, just those whiny synthesizers at the beginning. It's so atmospheric and so classic, and obviously when the drums come in, that's a classic moment. You get the huge gated reverb drum sound. Just you crank your speakers up, and you get those drums walloping at your face. It is a wicked experience. What I think the most notable thing about Mama is Colin's vocal performance. Now, of course, everyone talks about the laugh. It's kind of the hook of the song. Great part. I love that. It's quirky. The Genesis has got to be a little quirky. But the vocal performance in general on Mama I think it's the best Phil Collins ever sang. He is just giving it 120% on Mama. It is so good. I'm not even going to try and impersonate it because I'm not a singer, but it's just so good. I mean, it really, the moment right before the drums come in, next time you listen to it and you're kind of anticipating the drums, just take a minute and think of the voice. It is freaking incredible. Great vocal performance. And like I said, it's probably the best vocal performance I've ever heard of Phil Collins in studio. It's brilliant. Great song. Killer song. And it's a fantastic opener. I like the slow atmosphere open and then, gradually build to mayhem. Great stuff. Then we get track 2, That's All. This is a big hit on the album. Mama was a big hit too, but That's All is the more accessible hit. I really like it. It's I think they're trying to do kind of like an American country kind of a song, but Genesis style, obviously. But it sounds like Genesis. It reminds me a little bit of Trick of the Tail, kind of a simplified Trick of the Tail. It's got that Beatlesy kind of influence to it. The drums are great, very simplistic drumming, but the halftime around the end is really cool. Or like the double time, I should say. Little tempo changes. There's some great little drum fills in there too. Subtle, but it's still classic fill. So that's all. Good song. Then 3. This is the prog classic of the album. We get Home by the Sea and Second Home by the Sea. I hate that they put Second Home by the Sea because it's one song. There's 3 songs on the first side. You don't need to put 4 there. I don't know if that was for royalty purposes or they wanted the album to look more accessible. And if there was a big long song on track 3, then no one would buy the album because, oh my God, we can't have a 10-minute song. That's horrible. That's not what pop albums are all about. Well, it's not a pop album. It's a Genesis album. That's true. But Home by the Sea is the arguably the prog classic of the '80s by the band. It's great. Kind of a ghost story. I mean, it is very '80s. It's got the '80s production. The other notable thing on this album is that Collins was now fully embracing the Simmons pads. King Crimson did the Simmons pads in the '80s, and for some reason they don't sound as dated, but I think the production on the '80s Genesis albums is one of the weaker factors of that era. I'm not a big fan of the drum sound in a lot of cases. But that being said, the second Home by the Sea bit, like the big long extended instrumental, is classic. I think it's brilliant. It's really, really good dramatic Tony Banks keyboard stuff. Mike Rutherford has even just some of the rhythm playing is really, really cool. Like, at some point in the big instrumental section, you get that do 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 do. It's wicked. It's really, really good. And again, the Simmons pads. I said I'm not a big fan of them, but that drum motif, boom, chicka boom, boom, down, boom, chicka boom, boom. It's a great foundation for the rest of the instrumental to build up and be as epic as it is. And then of course it all winds its way back to the song part, and what you're left with is classic Genesis. I think it is a classic Genesis moment, even though we're in '83. Home by the Sea, classic, and obviously it was a huge part of the live show after that, and it's a very famous song, and rightfully so. We flip the side over. That was our really good side, and now we get the kind of hodgepodge side. I say hodgepodge. I don't want to be too critical because there are some good songs on it, but you get all the best stuff right at the front, and you flip the side and think, oh my God, what could be on here, and then you. It opens with Illegal Alien. Now this is an awkward song. Of course Gabriel did all of his funny voices and whatnot, and Collins had done a little bit of it, like I mentioned on Dodo, he kind of does the funny voices, but when he does the Mexican voice, it's just, it really is a little cringeworthy. I'm not a big fan of the voice on it. The song isn't necessarily too bad. The music on the song is kind of okay. It's like your Robbery, Assault, and Battery or All in a Mouse's Night kind of a song, where you get the different characters and you talk about quirky. I think they pushed the quirky line a little too far on Illegal Alien. But again, it's a weak song, but it's okay. I used to hate it a lot more. I used to dislike this song a lot. Now I'm just kind of feel more awkward about it than anything. I feel more awkward than I actively dislike it. Then we move into Taking It All Too Hard, track 2 of the second side. It's the ballad of the album, but it's a good ballad. I think it's a really good ballad. It's kind of got a darkness to it. The verses have this kind of arpeggiated guitar line, again reminiscent of the really early Genesis. So I mean those traits are still there. And this one doesn't strike me as being cheesy. It's not cheesy like Your Own Special Way or Like It or Not kind of affair, or Alone Tonight. Taking It All Too Hard is a solid, definitely a solid ballad. I like it. Then we get to track 3 of the third side, track 7 in total, and Just a Job to Do. This is this might be the strongest song on the second side. Really high energy. Got a really great single line guitar pattern. And I love the little shots too. The fantastic. Just a Job to Do. Underrated song. Underrated Genesis song from the 80s. I like it. Move on to track 8. We get Silver Rainbow. Another underrated song. It opens with that tribal drum thing with all the percussion stuff. It turns into a pretty peppy number. You know, I would put it in the pop song category, but the synth sound he's using in the chorus is really weird. That bow 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 row row row. You can't emulate it. It's a really unique sound. And yeah, it's a good song. There's an urgency to it, which is appealing. And then we get It's Gonna Get Better, which, again, it's a good song. Like even though I keep saying the second side's a hodgepodge and the second side is the weaker side, but really the only song that I've got an active problem with, I think, is Illegal Alien. And the rest of them are it's a collection of good Genesis songs. There's nothing. There really isn't anything too weak on here. But It's Gonna Get Better. I really like, actually. I love the orchestral kind of wash of keyboards at the start. That the notes kind of fading over top of each other like that, and then you get I'm not sure if it's a bass line or if it's something programmed, but that I love the bass to it. That dum 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 dum. And then there's a little synth line that kind of pops up after the chorus that reminds me of the early Genesis stuff. So it's good. The second side is a collection of good songs, and the first side is a collection of absolutely fantastic songs. So yeah, there you have it. Genesis by Genesis. It's certainly a far cry from Selling England or The Lamb Lies Down or Foxtrot, but they shouldn't have been doing that stuff. It was 10 years ago at this point. We were in 1983. If they were still trying to do Selling England, then they wouldn't have survived. And I think it's a good thing that the band survived, and I think it's a good thing that they didn't constantly repeat themselves. And I think this is a solid album from the 80s. More progressive than a lot of the other stuff that was going on. I've been using that word a lot in these videos, and I don't like that word, but I'm trying to describe the band, and that's just the best way to do it. So yeah, anyway, there it is. Genesis by Genesis, 1983. A good album, not to be underestimated. Stay tuned next time for the really controversial one. Whoa. See you then.